Oil is one of the planet's most important natural resources. However, it's more than worthless. It's gone negative. Prices of oil future contracts have dipped below zero, reaching historic low points almost never fathomed. The United States economy is heavily dependent on its relationship with oil, with the petrodollar. Previously, it was backed by gold. It puts the dollar and the world market in an interesting position. Typically, many companies would benefit from this, airline companies especially, and consumers. However, there's no demand now. What do we do with all this surplus oil now that we don't need? Will the oil market ever recover? These are some things that I would like to touch base on because now the world is now at a new shift. OPEC countries have been at odds with Russia and other oil producing countries for the last several years, creating truces and production cuts that turned out to be broken. Meanwhile, production within the United States has remained considerably high. Even when the coronavirus started wreaking havoc on the economy, production did not really subside. In fact, it still remained very high up until well into March. So what do we have? A result of a massive surplus in oil throughout the world. The reserves are at the brim of capacity. American companies failed to react quickly enough to begin to turn production offline in time. You can really see this by the oil rig count, which really didn't start dropping well into March. Oil prices continued to drop despite production cutbacks. Major oil producers started to realize that more needed to be done, and needed to be done quickly. Non-OPEC members and OPEC members, which were not too long ago at odds with one another and breaking up agreements, decided to try again to make a negotiation happen. However, it was too little, too late. Production was agreed to be cut at over 10 million barrels, but it wasn't nearly enough to stop the bleeding that was about to come for the price of oil.
Something happened for the first time in history. Oil prices entered negative territory. So what explains the plummet? And how can something like a barrel of oil be worth less than nothing? The simple answer, the coronavirus pandemic. Planes aren't flying, less cars and trucks are on the road, and fewer trains are on the tracks, meaning fuel production outweighs demand.
A lot of countries like Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Brazil, Russia produce oil because they need the revenue to keep their countries going. They don't turn off the tap. Now, there was an agreement with OPEC and Russia recently, the U.S., to reduce the amount of supply, but it wasn't adequate.
Another major issue is that there's nowhere to store it. This U.S. storage hub in Oklahoma is almost brimming over with unwanted oil. In fact, energy traders are having to pay buyers to take oil off their hands, which is where oil can fall into the negative. And even once the oil is purchased and moved, it doesn't necessarily translate to the pumps. So no, you won't get paid to fill up your gas tank. In fact, the effects of this could hurt the economy in the long term.
Countries like Canada and the U.S. that depend on oil to some degree have some economic problems. Now, countries like Saudi Arabia that really depend on, or Venezuela, Nigeria, they're going to have some tremendous economic problems. The Saudis have a lot of money relatively stored away, so they're in good shape. But some countries, there's going to be social upheaval. And this is probably the bigger problem, is that there's going to be enormous problems from this because there just won't be enough money in those countries for people to feed themselves, to have jobs, and so on.
The last time something remotely similar to this happened was the 1980s oil glut, and the effects lasted over 15 years.
So what does this mean for you as a consumer? In terms of gas prices, likely to keep going down. Most states are already starting to see a decrease in gas prices for most types of fuel. This will also benefit consumers during the winter months as well for heating oil, as oil prices are likely not to recover for some time. However, the other big problem is going to be the massive layoffs in the energy sector. A bailout for big oil companies is coming, if not inevitable, as these companies will not survive without helicopter money coming in very quickly. The industry will be never the same. Selling at massive losses, and now having the fear and shock of what a pandemic and a global crisis can do for you, confidence will take a long time to rebuild. The world has already seen unrest when oil prices become extreme. Countries like Venezuela are a prime example of what could happen for others. An example also is Russia, which is heavily dependent on oil. How will the regime stay in power? Or how will Iran handle this, which is heavily dependent now on oil as well? Iran is already flexing its muscles. Russia is already flexing its muscles as well, challenging American dominance. Other fronts could erupt as well, like the DMZ, South and North Korea. Typically times when oil prices become out of whack and people begin to panic and become desperate. The future is very uncertain now. However, the oil industry will take time to recover. Oil prices were already dropping for years, and now they've reached record historic lows. These are hard facts for many to even comprehend. However, I think that long-term oil is a buying opportunity, and it will inevitably go back up. Production cuts will take place, and maybe even more and more production cuts may need to be made until the price balances out. Yet, I highly doubt the powers be will allow oil to stay suppressed. Governments will need to act. Yet, it's another major consequence of the corona pandemic that will take some time to recover. Until next time, please like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you all for your support.